Here she is, the Ann Helsel.
Hi. Hi. Junior high, Altoona, Pennsylvania. Altoona is a little town. It's about midway in the middle of the state, halfway between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. And it sits in the beautiful pine tree forest of the Allegheny Mountains. And Altoona is named after a German town named Altona, Germany, because the Black Forest looked a good bit like the Allegheny Mountains. In its heyday, it was a very bustling railroad town. Now, junior high for us was 7th through 9th grade. That was middle school. And, you know, I went through the normal junior high angst that you've all shared. How do I fit in? Oh my God, I'm too tall. Oh my God, I'm too fat. Why am I not pretty? Why am I not smart? Why are my feet so big? Oh my God, my boobs are getting big. If they grow bigger by 9th grade, am I going to walk and fall forward? You know, and what about boys, right? Well, I am the oldest of 7 kids. There's me, and then Cindy was 2 years younger than me. Betts was a year younger than Cindy. Penny was 2 years younger than Betts. And finally we had a boy, baby Steve. And then as kind of a surprise, later came Dean Jr., and then much later, a very big surprise, came Freddie Helsel. And my dad used to say that if Fred had been first, that he would have quit. Because if any of you know Fred Helsel, he's Fred. I am also the oldest of 24 grandchildren. We're a newspaper family. We had the Altoona Mirror in the family for 110 years, 5 generations. And when I was in junior high, my grandfather was the publisher, and then when he passed away, my mother became the publisher. So I've been raised by 4 wonderful people. My grandfather was the patriarch, my grandmother was the queen, my dad was the chief, and my mother was the ambassador of fun. We are Methodists. Now, my family, the prejudices weren't whether you had a different color skin or economic level. If you were Methodist, the Lutherans and the Presbyterians were okay. The Catholics, a little iffy. You didn't want to be an Episcopalian, but God forbid you would be a Baptist. The Jews were tolerated, but everybody else was, you know, just a little bit questionable. Now, I love to sing. And in junior high, my favorite story is that it was the first year that I got to sing in the Christmas Eve cantata with the big choir. No wonder I can't see this. I don't have my glasses. I'm going blind up here. Our little church was called the Llyswen United Methodist Church, and it was in a little quaint area of Altoona. It was an older area where all the houses were big Victorian houses with wraparound porches, big green lawns, no fences, and our little church sat on the corner, and there was no public parking space, but you parked, you know, along the street. And it had, it was pretty, it was yellow brick, it had dark mahogany doors, and then white trim, and then there were 2 big stained glass windows, and they were very natural muted tones, like yellow and blues and greens and cream. And the neighborhood was very quaint in that it was the kind of a rolling neighborhood with a little stream that meandered through it. On the inside, there was, in the middle of it, and there were probably, you couldn't fit less, well, you probably couldn't fit more than 100 people in the church. In the middle section were long, high-back pews, and then on the left were pews, a shorter expanse of pews, and the same thing on the right. And it was kind of like, you know, an amphitheater. There was a big Sunday school class on the side. The front of it, there was an elevated part where the choir loft was, very small choir loft. And then the front of the church was 3-tiered. And on the back wall were pipe organs, pipes from the organ, and then this big cross, this oversized wooden cross. The top tier was where the minister had his pulpit and he talked. The middle tier was where you got baptized and you got married. And then the bottom tier had like a little railing that was about 1 foot high, and that's where you knelt to have communion. Now, my singing career began when I was about 3 years old. I loved to sing. And by 3 years old, I knew all the responses and I knew all the hymns. And they would sit me next to my grandmother because she would say, "Stop being gitsy." Now, that's a word she made up. It means stop squirming around and sit still. And one of my favorite responses was, Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. I was dramatic. So 3-year-old, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength. And my grandmother's going, stop it. Yeah, so when I was 4, they threw me into the kids' choir. You weren't supposed to be there till you were in 1st grade, but I sang so loudly and I knew all the hymns. They just put a robe on me and threw me in the 1st row. So, finally to make it to 7th grade and make it to the Christmas Eve cantata was extremely exciting. Now my dad only went to church on holidays. Other days, other Sundays, he was on the golf course or he slept in, but he made sure that Mom took all his kids to church. So Dad was in charge of getting the first wave of kids. That was me, the performer, my sister Cindy, and my sister Bets. And then they would, take a pew in the middle, my grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles, because it was Christmas Eve and everybody was home. Then my mother would come out and she would bring baby Steve and Penny and Lou Ann, a cousin who's stuck like glue to Penny because they were about 8 years old and they were tomboys and they could play, basketball and football better than any of the kids and the boys in the neighborhood. Baby Steve was about 4 months old, and since he had 4 sisters in front of him, he was our live baby doll. And so it wasn't uncommon for somebody to get him up from his nap and bathe him and dress him, and somebody else would feed him, and then somebody else would play with him. And so he ended up in this bunting type of thing, and we put him for a nap in the crib, in the middle room on the way out the door. So Dad took the first wave out, and Mother was to follow. The choir room of the church was downstairs, and that's where you checked your makeup, checked your hair, got your robe on. And that night they gave us, it's Christmas Eve night, they gave us little candles that had a little protector paper around them. And the idea is that we were going to go up this windy little steps and up to the vestibule outside the church and then go in and march down 2 rows with our lit candles, okay? And it would be very, very pretty. Now, the front was set up like 3 tiers. On the bottom row sat the sopranos, and then in back of them on the raised tier sat the altos, and then there was a row of chairs in back of that, and then the men stood in back of that, and then also men stood up on chairs in the back. So we looked like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, minus about 100 people. Now in the 7th grade, we had 2 dork girls. Their names were Margaret Rose Creighton and Carol Sue Peters. And their mothers sprayed the hell out of their hair and teased it and dressed them both a mistake. And they called them by their 2 names, Margaret Rose and Carol Sue. I mean, who does that but dork girls? But they were our Methodist dork girls, so we looked after them. Now you would think that the choir director would not put them together because between the both of them, they didn't have a brain. But no, that she did, and this is what happened. When we were winding up the steps, Margaret Rose Creighton accidentally set Carol Sue Peters' hair on fire, and she is screaming like a banshee. Lillian Kinzer, who was 100 years old, she's not 100, she looks like she's 100, deaf as a doorpost, sits in the back row, swore that night that she heard the Holy Ghost. She did not. She heard Carol Sue Peters screaming her ass off because her hair was on fire, right? So we're beating her about the head and shoulders. She's fine, she doesn't get burnt. But the smell of hair, burnt hair is just... So we got them settled down, we got their candles lit again, we calm down, and we start the processional down to, "O come, all ye faithful." We take our places in the tiered, up in the tiered part, and the minister gets up, and he welcomes us, and he wishes us a Merry Christmas, and he prays us in, and then he proceeds to have communion. Now I look at my grandmother, and my grandmother is scowling at the minister. The reason being is that the Methodists traditionally only have 1 communion, and that's at Easter time. And I never liked the, eat the body and drink the blood, and I mean, I knew it was wafers, but Jesus, I mean, obviously, right? So my grandmother is not happy because these new ministers will have communion at any given time of the year, and her greatest fear is that we are turning into Catholics. Now in the choir is a girl that we all hate. Her name is Liza Gearhart, and we hate her because she's beautiful. She's in high school, she has long, beautiful hair, she has beautiful eyes, smile, killer body, she sings like a bird. Her dad owns the Ford dealership in town, so they have money, so she has all the nice clothes. And she is in high school, and she has her own car. And it is a convertible. So I'm irritated with her anyhow, right? I look over, and she has on long spike heels. And when she goes to kneel for communion, she gets the spike heel caught in her robe, and she takes her down, and she's riding around, and we are so happy going, thank you. Well, the choir director helps her up, gets her uncaught. She sits down. We're all enjoying her embarrassment, and we're about ready to go again. Now, that's the second incident. And you would have thought after the first incident that I would have thought, okay, things are, not going to go too well. Now, we're about to start the cantata. Now, a cantata is a concert, all music, and it's some original music, and it's also traditional things like Silent Night and We Three Kings and all that. We're about to start when the last of the Helsels arrive. Now, they would have arrived sooner rather than later. But when my mother drove out and Penny and Llyswen were ready to get out of the car, she realized she had left baby Steve at home. So 10 minutes back, 10 minutes, to the house, 10 minutes back. And now my mother's irritated because it's starting to snow. She can't find a parking place close up because she's late. So she gives baby Steve to Penny, who's 8, and to take in to Dad. Okay, they get into the church and they walk down the aisle, and there are these two bitty old sisters that sit where our family sits. They've been sitting in those seats for years. God love you. If you try to sit in them, they will make you move. So Llyswen, my cousin Llyswen, is getting in front. Excuse me, lady, excuse me. And she's going in front. And my sister Penny hurls baby Steve back like a football, throws him over the top of the heads of the two ladies, and the whole church is going, My grandmother is mortified. My dad and my grandfather are laughing. And everyone is looking at me as though I am a criminal. And when my mother walks in, they look daggers at her, and I'm sure she's thinking, what the hell? She didn't know what happened, right? Okay. The choir sits down, and we're ready to start. Now, when you get into the 7th grade, you are allowed to sing a solo. I actually sang my solo the year before because they didn't have any 7th graders, so they brought in talent. And you got to sing Away in the Manger. Now, Margaret Rose Creighton did not want to sing a solo. Her mother did not make her. Carol Sue Peters did not want to sing a solo. Her mother made her. So I look over at Carol Sue Peters, who is about to start her solo, and she is the color of green pea soup. The next thing I know, the choir director grabs her, runs her down the aisle into the vestibule, and everybody hears, into the trash can. The smell, they open the front door, throw the trash can out in the snow, and Carol Sue Peters disappears down into the bowels of the church, never to be seen again from that evening. So the choir director sits down and she nods at me. The choir director is sitting in the first row facing us. And I sing, Away in a manger, no crib for a bed. And when I'm done, there's a respectful silence. My grandmother is proud, my mother is happy, but there's no applause. God forbid you would applaud in the Methodist church. Okay, the next number is a little bit shaky because of everything that's happened. But the next 2 numbers go pretty well, and then we're into Silent Night. Now, I think, okay, this is going to be beautiful, because how can you screw up Silent Night, right? Okay, so it's a very nice rendition that has a lot of different harmonies to it. And what happened was this. The lady who plays the organ, her name is Paula Ramalotti. She is an Italian woman with big bassoons and big hair, dyed hair. Now, I don't know if you know anything about playing the organ, but the right hand plays on the top, plays the melody on the top. The left hand plays the alto on the bottom keyboard, and then the feet have these pedals. So you have to be talented and coordinated, which she is. She's a great organist. Now, the only people that can see Paula Ramalotti is the choir. The reason for that is that there are these humongous red poinsettia plants with big green leaves, like 20 or 25 of them, around the organ. So she has to watch the choir director for the cues, and the audience can't see what she's doing. Just as about we're ready to start Silent Night, I glance over, and there is a big praying mantis on the leaf right next to Paula Ramalotti's boobs. Oh yes, it dives down in her cleavage. She is going silently berserk. She keeps, to her credit, she keeps her right hand going, she keeps her feet going, but she is digging around trying to get this thing. She looks like a Methodist organist having an epileptic fit. It's funny, right? It's funny. Okay. She does find the bug, and she throws it against the wall of the choir loft, and it dies. It's Christmas Methodist death. But in the meantime, Silent Night sounds like Silent Night. The people are looking at us like we've lost our minds. The choir director looks like she's going to faint. My grandmother is scowling. You see, I'm the kind of person that can find things that aren't funny. But when something's genuinely funny, I can barely contain myself. And I am desperately trying to do so. Well, we get through Silent Night, and it's a silent disaster is what it is. Now, I'm happy at this point because I know we only have 2 more numbers to go. The men have their number, and then we have the final number. And so I breathe a sigh of relief because we are almost done. Thank you, Jesus, all the saints in the Catholic Church, and Mary, Mother of God. The men are in trouble. It's gotten very hot up in the 3rd tier. And it's taken a little longer than expected. So 2 of them are already laying flat on the floor in the choir loft. One of them has his head down in between his legs so he doesn't faint. So left standing is kind of an old man in his 70s who lost his voice years ago, and a 7th grader who hasn't found his voice yet because it's changing. So the men are supposed to sound like, "We 3 wise men from the east, la 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 la." Instead it sounds, "We 3 wise men from the east, la la la." Okay, we start the last song, and I breathe a sigh of relief because we did a really good job in the opening, and it's a reprise. Along the old and Christmas road, we traveled once again. Now, somebody in the church decided that it would be swell if there was a star on a pulley that went from the back of the church, to the front, and was lighted and shone above the choir. And in rehearsal, it worked beautifully. Now, you would think that they would put a technical person in charge of this. No, they put the lady who cleans the church on Wednesday afternoons to pull the pulley. And she's a wonderfully simple lady, and down in the choir, in the basement, she said, "Dee Dee, it's my job to get the star from the front, the back to the front." And I said, "You're going to do a wonderful job," right? Well, I don't know if it got off track. I don't know what happened, but every time she pulls the pulley, it goes rack, rack. So the last number sounds like, "Along the rack, an old and crit, rack, rack, must rack." Any technical person would stop, but that didn't happen. Okay, we're finally finished. We sit down. The minister stands. He looks like he's 3 years older than when he sat down. And he tries to thank us in his way that he can. And he takes a collection. Now, God knows why anybody would want to contribute to that night. But the Methodists always ask you for money, so. He wishes us a Merry Christmas, and he prays us home. We split in 2 lines, and we proceed out the aisles singing, "Joy to the world, the Lord has come." So when I walk past my dad, I sing, "Joy to the world, thank God we're done." And my dad loses it. He laughs so loud that everybody hears him, sinks down. My cousins came up afterwards and said, "Oh, that was really a nice concert." And I say, "Oh, Merry Christmas, shut up." And that, ladies and gentlemen, was my very first 7th grade Christmas Eve cantata at the Altoona, Pennsylvania, United Llyswen Methodist Church. Hallelujah, thank you very much. Amen.